standards, right education system.
I'm the former Frank Key.
Of the Northwest Pass, we really need somebody different.
Your career, you're used to winning. Life, it was everything to us.
7 or 8 weeks of two-a-days.
They really made me appreciate
We're allowed to win.
when he's coming in and we'll be shooting the whole time.
Let's go back real quick to the Enid Walk of Fame. Of course, we have training in confined space.
Legitimate needing to know a little more.
A good safety tip on that, Steve.
Putting a hat on and getting out there and doing the job.
The television model that you watched growing up.
Houston, this is the International Space Station.
City Connections begins right now.
Hello again, I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid, and welcome to City Connections. We have a very special guest today, and we're going to be talking about driver's license. We're going to talk about testing, and I'm really excited to have our special guest today. But before we introduce him, I want to share a few things with you that I looked at before today's show. There are 14 different levels of driver's license permitted in North Korea. However, private car ownership is forbidden. So I'm trying to figure out if there's 14 levels of license, but you're not allowed to own a car, why do the license? Here's something else that's interesting. The speed limit is always 62 miles per hour for new drivers in Southern Australia, regardless of what the sign says. So does that mean that if it's 35 miles per hour, you're still supposed to drive 62? You know, it's on the internet, so you know it's the truth, okay? Here's another point. There, as you can gather, there is no universal standard for getting a driver's license. And then I really like this one. Until recently, you didn't even need to take a test before getting your license in Mexico City. All you had to do was verbally commit that you were going to be a safe driver. Of course, they've changed that recently. So as you can tell, the laws, the testing, the expectations are all over the place. And to set us straight today, we've got Brad Finley from of all places, Perry, Oklahoma, and other places as well. He heads up Cowboy Driving Academy, and Brad Finley is with us today here at the Enid Television Network studios to talk about, well, defensive driving is one thing. Brad,
very good.
Thank you for coming over.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Pleasure
you
to be
being here. Okay. Now, this will date me. I remember a guy named Butch Boer. He was my football coach, but he was my driver's ed coach.
That's right.
And you had driver's ed in school, and I think you had to be 15 and a half or something. You take the course, take the written test or whatever, and then when you turned 16, you could go downtown Perry, Oklahoma, and sit with an OHP guy or whatever and take your driving test. 16, you had your license, and off to California you went. Right. That was in those days. So I got an understanding of things have really changed. So with driver's ed out of schools, then Cowboy Driving Academy kind of filled that void, right? So just tell us what Cowboy Academy is all about.
Well, we're trying to be a one-stop shop for everybody when they get to that point in their life. And you just were talking earlier about 20 years ago when your daughter went through, parents get to this certain point raising the kids to get to right. 15, 16, and then they're like, wow, it's changed. Where do I do? What do I, where do I go? And so we've kind of had an image of a one-stop shop where they can call, and most people don't understand that their child can start earning their permit credit when they turn 15. And they can start taking driver's ed the day they turn 15, and the state has given them incentive to take advantage of that law. And if they finish the class and then the 6 hours of required drive time before they go for their permit, it actually waives their test.
Interesting.
The logic behind that is that if they're trained before they get their permit, before mom and dad are legal to let them drive, then mom and dad will let them drive more. And that's the key to producing a safe driver. And so that's one of the things, you mentioned 15 and a half, and a lot of parents still fall in that trap, and we'll get calls and say, hey, we turned 15 and a half on Monday, what do you got for us? And it's like, well, you won't be able to get your permit on time at 15 and a half unless you have driver's ed. We recommend you start as soon as they turn 15 because life happens, and even though it sounds like a little bit of driving 6 hours in the car, it's 3 2-hour drives. We do 2-hour drives because it takes that long just to get them calmed down and then to start learning and then space them out to where there's some practice involved. But the whole goal is long lives, not cut short.
Sure.
Well, so if they're late and they call us a week ahead of when they turn 15 and a half, if they attend the 10 hours required classroom, they can still get their permit on time They just have to take the test like we did.
I see.
And it's
Okay.
20 questions. They have to get 15 out of 20. And the kids that come through our school, we're 95% success rate on the written test, but it's what I learned at Ditch Witch and in Perry growing up from a teacher is there's reasons behind the reasons. So we talk about laws, and that's really what you're tested on, but a lot of people say, I just want to study for the test, but they don't look deep enough to know those laws are there because somebody's died. And if enough people die, they're like, hey, we're going to make a law to say, don't do that. And our whole goal is, we've been in it now 13 years, and a lot of people say, you should change the company name to Mom's Best Friend because we really lean on you, but you do it the way we want it done, which is
Sure.
we don't care when they get their license. We'd like for them to get it on time, but the goal is really for them to come home safe. And as parents, we know that.
And I appreciate you being here today, because even in a short amount of time with driver's ed, in the typical or the old standard of being in school has faded away, and then, you know, entities like yourself fill that void. But it seems like it's gotten complicated with a number of ages and when you can take tests. And I was doing a little research before today's meeting, and I think it was in Montana that you can begin the process at 14 and a half. Well, growing up in Perry, you started the process whenever, because you'd be out on the farm.
Be
and you'd be 8 years old driving a hay tractor, or you'd drive a stick shift old international truck at 12 years old. So you were getting all that practice in, very illegal, but you were still getting that practice in. But again, you were keeping it on the farm. You weren't out on Interstate 35.
We were on private property.
You were doing that. So you've talked about the ages to get a license at all. Let's talk about some of the new testing laws. And again, it seemed like it was so simple way back then. It's all for safety. It's all for keeping people's lives. But what are some of the new testing laws, Brad, that we need to discuss here?
Well, like we talked about, they can get their permit at 15 and a half. So we have a written test that we take to get our permit. A lot of people get confused, and they get ready to take their drive test, and they're like, well, is there another written or drive or whatever? You have 3 tests you have to take. The permit test you can take at 15 and a half if you've had driver's ed.
Okay.
Through a commercial school like mine, there's many in the state, or a public school that offers driver's ed, which most don't have them anymore. I think Enid has one before school starts, kind of as an elective, and then some schools might have it in the summer if a coach is able to teach it.
Sure.
And then they have an online parent taught. But if they're involved in one of those, they can get their permit at 15 and a half. If they're not trained, the state has said, look, under the graduated driver's license law, if they're not trained, they can't get their permit till they're 16. But they can forego all the training, take the written test at 16, then they have to have their permit if they're under 18 for 6 months before they can take a drive test. Well, if they do that, God forbid they pass, now they're really dangerous. But, you know, I'm an examiner, and the test is real simple, but that's what we try to convey to the parents is like, okay, so they passed. The people in the cemetery passed. And so it's not about can you drive, it's can you drive safely. So that's what the state kept in mind on these laws.
Sure.
So under the graduated driver's license, now you've had your permit for 6 months, you take your test, you can go to DPS, wait in line, and now with the budgets and all that stuff and the funding, it's 2 weeks out or it's just a long wait. And it's like in Edmond, people were camping out overnight to get in line to get a test time the next day. So that's why they passed a law for commercial driving schools to become designated examiners, to where we can give the test to anybody that's taken a driver's ed course, either parent-taught, public school, or commercial school. The people like that because once they get their permit, they can schedule their drive test 6 months in advance. They get a test time. We test right out at Da Vinci's, no line. We give them up to 2 hours of practice before just to calm them down, and then we can send them straight to the tag agent afterward. And that's any designated examiner.
Okay, so let me ask you this, with all that you've said, when you have your license and you're driving on your own, you mentioned before we started that a young person has their license, but they're only allowed really one person in the car. And that's at 16, or when is that?
That's at 16.
That is 16.
If they're under 18 years old and they pass their drive test, they still, under graduated driver's license, have restrictions. And
Okay.
it's about saving lives. And we tell people when they pass, you've just started the journey.
Yeah.
Because it's a statistic in Oklahoma, within 30 days of passing their test, half the kids are in a wreck or get a ticket within 30 days, and half those wrecks are in the parking lots. And then we usually follow that up by asking them, what color are reverse lights? And they say, red. Well, they're white. That's why they don't know what to look for.
Yeah.
So when they're testing, then they can take the drive test either at DPS or with us. But they have, if they're under 18, they have to have the permit for 6 months. Now, with the restriction, once they pass their test, they have to go 6 months with no wrecks or tickets. They get one person in the car only, or more than one, as long as they live in your house and they're considered family.
Interesting.
A lot of people miss that up. They don't
By
know.
a show of hands, I'd raise my hand that, when you got your license in the old days at age 16, then you went and picked up everybody that you wanted to say, hey, I got my license, and off we go, even though you're just going to drive around town or something. So this is really enlightening to have you on the program today to share those things, because as grandparents and as parents that maybe you have a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, you need to be kind of prepared that in the next 3 to 5 years, this is coming your way, and you need to know that, well, Johnny may really need just have one in the car if he's under 18. So,
And you know what? We're getting to that generation where we didn't have cell phones growing up, and when we took trips, we watched Dad drive. And we knew streets, and we knew north from south. We're into a generation now that's had movies in front of them and their cell phones when they're taking trips, and they come to class, and I literally had this happen last month. We're on the third drive, so we've been driving 6 hours. We're in the kid's neighborhood, and I said, take me to your house. And he goes, I don't know how to get there. I mean, we lost our sense of direction, and we forget how much we learned just from watching Dad and asking, is that, we look for street signs and that kind of thing. So it's a challenge nowadays, and they need to start driving something at 12 or 13, whether it's a golf cart or a lawnmower or bicycle or something, just so they understand it.
yeah, very good.
Yeah.
My very special guest today is Brad Finley with Cowboy Driving Academy, and we're talking about defensive driving. We're talking about the new laws and the new testing laws here in the state of Oklahoma, all in preparation for your young person that's getting ready to drive. Brad, as a young person takes all of these tests, let's talk a little bit about insurance, because I remember the day when Mom said, okay, whenever you get your license, you can drive the so-called family car, but you're going to have to do something, Steve, to take care of insurance. And so that was my either haul more hay, mowed more lawns or something, but I was going to pay for my insurance part. Tell us what impact all of this pre-training, testing, education has on insurance for that young person to get ready to drive.
And that's one of the things I love about my business is, like I said, I was a ditch witch and worked with your mom for 17 years, second generation. And there's not very many businesses where you can honestly tell your customers that you come to me, whatever you spend with us, it doesn't cost you anything, because we're going to get you a return on your money on what we save you on your insurance. The driver's ed with most companies carries a 10% discount. When you think about insurance companies, they're managing risk. So if you've got a driver's ed completion certificate, you've proven you've taken the steps to get trained. Of course, it's law, but if you do that, you're less risk. Insurance companies like less risk, so they reward that. Defensive driving with most companies, I don't know a company that doesn't give a discount for defensive driving. Most average is 5%. There are other companies like State Farm offers, that I know of. I've been with Cheryl Mandeville since I've been in high school, but they produce their own DVD, and if you go through that program, it's got a booklet, it gives you practice drives, and then you report back. If you go through their program, it's as high as an additional 20% off. So
there are some benefits.
And then 80% of our students that go through don't just do driver's ed. They do testing, and then after they pass their drive test, we offer 2 defensive driving classes to get them that extra discount. But like most of the parents tell me, even if I get all my money back, if that's what my kid needs, that's what we're going to do. Yeah. But it just gives incentive. We all like return on our money, but we also want grandkids at some point.
Okay. Well, our topic today on City Connections is driver education. My very special guest is Brad Finley. We'll have more with Brad in just a few moments. We'll talk a little bit more about defensive driving, talk a little bit about what to do if your license expires, and also where the Cowboy Driving Academy offers services across northwestern and north central Oklahoma. We'll do that in just a moment here on City Connections. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Driver's Education here on City Connections. I'm Steve Kime with my very special guest, Brad Finley, and I appreciate Brad being here at the Enid Television Network studios today to just really enlighten us all about the new testing laws and driving laws, and it's all about a driver's license, and the end result is to be a safe driver, everybody to be a safe driver. Brad, share with us, where, as Cowboy Driving Academy, where do you offer? I know I've seen your car in the Enid area, but what other locations that you have for people to know that are watching this show saying, I might need to investigate this in a few years?
Right. It's on cowboydriving.com, and we have a scheduled locations page. But we started in Stillwater because, you know, Perry's close to Stillwater.
Yeah.
And when I left Ditch Witch, I owned a building there that my wife had a cheer gym, Cowboy Kids, so that's how we called it Cowboy Driving. And then with the advent of social media, one of the things I learned with Facebook and Ditch Witch is I always told people, if you like us, tell your friends. And if you don't, tell me.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
This cute little girl said, hey, if you'll get a Facebook page and I like your page, he said, you need Facebook. And I, of course, as a dinosaur, I said, well,
Sure.
I don't have time for all that kid stuff. And she goes, but Mr. Finley, if I like your page and I have 1,200 friends, then they all see it. And the light bulb in my head went off, and I'm like, well, I was born at night, not last night. I gave her, so what do we do next? I gave her my phone and said, set me up. She asked me about 5 questions, made a post that morning at about 10:30. By the end of class at 4 o'clock, I had 86 likes. And now we're getting people from Ponca City, which is one of our towns, Enid, Woodward, Oklahoma City.
Okay, so you got the center part of the state,
You bet.
north central, and
Pretty much
northwest.
from I-40 north and I-35 west.
Well, the main reason, Brad, for having you over here today is because I was presented with a situation that happened here recently with of a young person that I guess received a ticket. They were out late at night. They had their driver's license, and I guess there's a curfew in Enid or in communities, excuse me, across the state. But they received a ticket because they were out too late. Curfew. And I'm thinking, if you have a driver's license, drive whatever you want to do. So explain to us about the license, that age, and also the curfew. Is that just an independent city, or is this a state law?
It's a state deal,
Okay.
and it's part of the graduated driver's license program. And like we said, the laws are there because somebody's died. So when they pass their test, and then we tell them the statistics about being in a ticket, but then for 6 months they have the curfew, which is 5 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
And that's the only times they can drive. And then they can have one person in the car with them during that time because of distracted driving. A lot of people are used to distracted driving as texting and so forth. Other people in the cars is distraction, and very common in high school.
And that statement to me was just so foreign because I have the mindset or groomed to believe that once you got your license, just off you go. And then when they shared with me the story about their young person getting a ticket later on, I thought, that doesn't make sense, you know? 10, 11, midnight, 2 a.m. Nothing happened goods after midnight, as they say, but still, I had no idea. So that is state law, and I think parents and grandparents need to be mindful of that as well. Just because Joni has the license, there is that curfew for that first 6 months, as you said.
That's right. With no wrecks or tickets, they get one person unless it's family that live in their household, not a friend and a step niece over, or a step cousin or a step brother or whatever. They have to live in your house.
Okay.
And that's it. Or one friend without all the others.
All right.
Now, that's for 6 months. Then once they get no wrecks or tickets, most people forget this. They go back to the tag agency and get a replacement license and get that restriction lifted. Then they can drive unrestricted. But that's the reason is for...
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the individual that's had a driver's license for 70 years or 7 years, whatever, but for whatever reason, they let that driver's license expire. What kind of grief are they signed up for to get their license back? Just for whatever reason, they just missed the date to renew it or something? What do you have to do?
Well, you have to retest. And we get a lot of people scared to death.
That's depressing right there. Let's move on to another topic. Oh, retest.
Edit that, please, yeah. But no, it's you don't want it to expire. And most people don't know how good their license is for. And they also don't know their permits last just as long as a license. A permit is a license, but both last 4 years.
I was going to say 6. I already missed that one. All right.
But most people look and it's like, oh, that's 3 years from now, and they're used to not checking. And then it always happens when you go to check it, it's expired by a day or two.
Yeah.
And if it's less than 30 days, I don't think you have to test. But if it's more than that, then you have to retest.
I have one more question with Brad Finley before we have our break here, our final break. But Brad, tell me, danger zone training by pulse driving. Here we're talking defensive driving and driver education. So danger zone training by pulse driving. Explain that to me.
That's a corporate defensive driving program.
Okay.
Then they had such great results with that. Because corporate defensive driving, any company that's putting people on the road, they require it. And you can't have so many points on your license or you can't drive a company vehicle. But they also require it. And it's like, well, why would they do that? And the kids, you've been driving 20, 30 years. Why are they teaching you defensive driving? You already know how to drive. And that's exactly, we are humans. We get distracted. We got our wives calling, wanting us to bring home milk and bread, and we got doctor's appointments and ball games. And that's when things happen. And I just did a defensive driving class for Conoco Phillips, which is now Phillips. 70 of their pipeline guys that keep the pipelines running. And it's not that we're retraining them how to drive, but they forget to do their walk around, just basic things that we talk about, and people get killed. And they've had such good luck with that they're like, well, let's offer it to the novice drivers. And so what we offer is after a kid passes their driver's test, we have the 2 defensive driving courses, the Danger Zone Corporate that's online. They send the kid a email once a month with a module that takes about 15 minutes. The parents get a free subscription so they can see what we're sending their child. But it's like the computers and phones nowadays, we need to refresh it. You know, if you have problems, they say, what do you do? Turn it off, turn it back on, and refresh. Well, we tell the kids, once you pass your drive test, you're not finished. And this next year of your life is the most important year of your life. And so we're going to refresh you once a month for the next 12 months on the 12 deadly sins that insurance companies say. And most people don't realize, you know what the #1 fatality collision is under 25 years old? A left-hand turn less than 35 miles an hour.
Wow.
So the first month's module is on speed.
Wow.
The second month's module is on distracted driving. Cell phones is a biggie, but that's number 2 on the top 10.
And I think sometimes you see that when there's a police report or something on a fatality, and they would say that either seat belts were not used or speed was involved. Well, Brad, we need to close out excuse me, our conversation here. Brad Finley is our special guest with Cowboy Driving Academy. We have one final question with Brad right after this. Thank you for staying with us on City Connections. Welcome back to driver's education or defensive driving course today, or just really the understanding new testing laws and really driving laws in regards to a driver's license. And special guest Brad Finley with Cowboy Driving Academy, driving all the way over here to the Enid Television Network studio to enlighten us today. Brad, I tell you, you've shared about some dates and some ages and some laws, and it's been very enlightening to me, and I hope for you at home. So here's my final statement for our viewers at home. They could be a parent or grandparent, and they do have a child that maybe is 12, 13, 14, but they're getting ready to move into this driving chapter in their life. So with the role that you play in really protecting kids, preparing them to drive, even though these kids are a couple years away, what can they be doing in preparation for this driving chapter?
When you're driving them to activities, have them put the cell phones up and talk to them and show them what you're doing, like what we talked about growing up, where they know what street signs look like, they know their directions. Get them in a golf cart. Get them on something on private property where they're used to driving something. Then get them trained somewhere. And the thing is, a lot of people think that they'll just drop their kids and they're like, well, my kid's not any good. And I'm like, well, okay, we get you started, whether it's public schools or commercial schools or whatever, but we're actually holding hands through the process. And I tell the parents, the state law tells you you have to drive 50 hours with your kid in the 6 months they have a permit. They only require us for 6. So who's really in charge of their training? You or us. So we're getting ready to promote courses to teach the parents how to teach the kids. We actually have a parent meeting where we instruct them on that way, because if we train them good and the parents don't drive with them when they have their permit,
Right.
they lose it. So it takes both of us and get them started, get them trained, and then realize that after they test, that first year of their life is real important, and we really want them to live a long time. And I've got 5 police officers work for me, and they said, you don't ever want to see a mama cry. That's the hardest thing about our job. And so that's why we take it personal, and we're like, look, we're saving the world one kid at a time. But, you know, we realize we're not going to get everybody. And so whether it's in the school, just get training, it reduces risk, and we live a long time, and the parents just get grandkids, and everything's happy.
Yeah, very good. Well, appreciate the work you do. Brad
Betcha.
Finley, Cowboy Driving Academy, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. It's been very educational, and I tell you what, we can't go wrong when we get behind the wheel and do the mindset of defensive driving. We just need to look out for everybody, including ourselves. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here today on City Connections. Again, as we talked about a variety of topics, all about keeping us safe, and especially our special loved ones or young people safe as they enter into that chapter of getting a driver's license and starting driving. So hope you enjoyed the program today, and I look forward to spending more time with you next week as we have another topic. Until then, this is Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Make it a great day. Thank you, everyone.